Hey guys, Steve. I hope everyone is fantastic. Very quickly, the Tom Brown Tracker is a controversial knife. Depending on your opinion, the knife is either a wilderness survival lightsaber or a mall ninja movie prop. I'm not reviewing Tom Brown in this video. Remember, this is a picture of him here. I'm only reviewing his knife. My opinion of this knife is not more important or valid than your opinion of this knife. That's number two. So I'm not trying to tell anyone what to think about the knife. This is just my impression. We'll be looking at the knife's history, its dimensions, its design, and then put some specific claims made in its user's manual to the test. I found 3 key points or elements that heavily influenced my opinion of the knife, including its 28-ounce weight, its high cost, and its intended use, which has resulted in the inclusion of an interrupted primary edge seen here, and also seen here in the knife's manual. Page 11, and it's something they refer to as the quarter rounder. It's not the only design element I sort of question, but it's the most significant for me. We'll tie all 3 of these key issues together eventually, but first let's look at the dimensions and stats here. 1095 steel, 58 HRC, almost 12 inches long, 6-inch blade, quarter-inch thickness, 28 ounce weight, 28 ounce. That's very heavy. Most fixed blades in this size are 10 to 14 ounces. Cost $225. Micarta handles in this very nice Kydex sheath with these metal clips that I think are actually pretty functional. You can rotate them to either a scout carry or a regular vertical carry. It's nice. I think it's a great sheath. There's a nice lanyard hole. The handle is nice. It's one of the more ergonomic handles I've used. So points for ergonomics. What you're going to see here is me forging my own 6-inch bladed knife out of 5160 steel to compare the chopping ability of the knife I make with the interrupted blade of the Tracker, because that's, I think, a key element for me personally. I'm making out a quarter-inch stock and will attempt to make it as heavy as the Tracker, which will be quite a feat. 28 ounces is heavy. So let's talk history while the video rolls here. The Tracker was designed in the 1980s by survival and tracking instructor Tom Brown after a conversation in which Mr. Brown was asked if he could have one tool in the wilderness to survive with, what would it be? And he subsequently designed the Tracker because he didn't think it existed, such a knife existed. He licensed it to production for several knife makers over the decades. The first one was Ed Lomby and then David Beck. Both either retired or the knife fell out of production with them. Mr. Brown was hired as a consultant in 2001 for filming of The Hunted with Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones. It was Benicio's favorite weapon. And so interest was definitely rekindled here. And the knife was ultimately put into production by the oversized tactical knife manufacturer Tops. It won a cover on the April 2003 Blade magazine around the time of the release. And Tops continues its production at the time of this video. David Beck seems to claim some ownership of the Tracker design on his website and still produces something like them under the WSK, or Wilderness Survival Knife moniker, a term he claims to have coined in 2003. And in fact, according to Mr. Beck, his version of the Tracker was used in the movie The Hunted and not Tom Brown's, or at least he claims that that's what the Blade magazine says. So there's some other custom knife makers who sort of dabble in it. There was a guy named Aaron Pullen at Red Scorpion Knives, which I think is now defunct. He made this RS6, which has had a lot of reviews. And then you can find Chinese replications all over eBay and Amazon as well. And some seem to be better than others. I don't know. I would never probably buy one of those, but I can see the temptation. It's $250 otherwise. So part of the history is pretty key for me, and that is that the knife was designed as a do-all. But asking one knife to do it all in a wilderness survival setting or an outdoor setting is really probably not the best. In fact, there's pretty overwhelming consensus that it takes more than one blade or more than one knife. More than one sharp instrument. So let me show you a picture. This is the Nessmuk Trio. A famous woodsman and adventurer, George Washington Sears, known as Nessmuk, wrote about his favorite wilderness tools in the late 1800s. He carried a double bit hand axe, a pocket folding knife, and a slightly larger, thin, rounded blade for skinning and cutting meat. So people have taken this and they've been updating it and assimilating their own version of the Nessmuk Trio ever since. And so as technology moves forward, some of those tools change, but the notion of carrying multiple blades in the wilderness survival setting is pretty much gospel. Here you can see that from the factory. It's not quite razor sharp, but close. It was popping some hairs. And you guys know I like to test cutting 3/4 inch manila. And this is just brutal. The knife's going nowhere. It's a pretty steep grind. And I'm trying both parts of the blade here, but it's just not doing much at all. That interrupted blade is really sort of taking its toll as far as some of the more common tasks. This is some harder wood, dry wood that I found laying on the ground. And again, that steep grind is really not biting very well in this case. And when it does, it tends to sort of drive down into the wood. So I'm going to try to draw the quarter rounder portion up and make some feathering, these little spirals. It slips off the stick a couple times, and I'm not sure I feel that's entirely safe. Here's some softer wood. It's doing a much better job. Again, we're just using that first about 2.5 inches of the draw knife portion of the blade. The manual lists routine carving and using the draw knife portion of the blade as a draw knife as part of the knife's repertoire. And I believe it's possible. I don't think it functions as well as a regular knife. I did try to use it as a draw knife. I don't have the technique or skill, so I'm not even going to bother to show you. I couldn't get it to work, but I'm sure other people could. So the question when you're chopping, which is what we're going to examine now, is what are you going to chop with? This first portion of the blade, the quarter rounder, that notch, or the forward curved portion of the blade? Here's the hand positions the manual goes through. This is hand position number 1. You choke down one groove and you're in position number 2. And then down again, you engage the lanyard, and you're in hand position number 3. And you're extending your reach and subsequently power as your arch gets wider. So here we go. I'm using the second hand position shown. It does a good job with small diameter branches. For major chopping, I end up engaging the front portion of the blade, the curved edge, which I didn't expect, but that's how it works out. So let's take a closer look. As the diameter gets wider, as the length you have to span with the cutting edge gets wider, you start seeing some problems. So even though it excelled at small branches, you can see we're leaving these divots where just that quarter rounder or that notch is engaging the wood, and it's sort of digging in. You're not doing any cutting except for this small 1 to 2 inch section. Cutting from there to there, and there's no chopping going on the rest of the width of the branch. And you can get around that by working around the circumference. By the way, this is why you wear gloves. It's not to protect your fingers, it's to keep blisters from forming. Note to self. So you can work your way around the branch circumferentially and work around that problem. Most people do that anyway. But so here's my knife. It's obviously inferiorly made, compared to a production knife. But it's the same. It's about 4 ounces less than the Tom Brown Tracker. But it has the same blade length, only it's not interrupted. And it's still, by all measures, a very heavy knife. Just doesn't quite have that same weight benefit as the Tom Brown Tracker. So you can see what's happening. Those strikes are cutting across the entire length of this branch. And to me, that's much more efficient. But as you can see, when we start engaging the quarter rounder portion of the knife, I'll show you what happens, because this is what happens in a wider diameter piece of wood. We'd be engaging this portion of the knife. Now take a look. See how you have a rounded divot? So beyond the borders of that 2x4, you know, along the sides of that rounded divot, you really wouldn't be doing much work. So here's an uninterrupted edge, and obviously you can see the benefits. Takes out nice full chips all the way across, and it would do that even if the board were wider. So that's some pathetic sawing. It says it's capable of sawing through small diameter branches, and we put a notch in it after about a minute and a half, but not much more. It's very interesting. It says, quote, the saw blade can cut through small branches with no difficulty, and it has been tested and found effective at cutting through the skin of an aircraft and the metal of a car door. Well, here's a car door. Are you going to be able to cut through a car door with this sawback? No. Let's just try some 28 gauge steel. And no. Here's some aluminum. No dice. Let's turn it on its edge. Teeth are still getting caught. Here's a little bit thicker piece of aluminum. Maybe we just need something wide enough that the teeth don't grab it. Nope. The manual says that a stealthy hunter could use this tool to take deer or other game from a camouflaged position, and I'm assuming they're talking about fashioning a spear, because going hand to hand with a medium or large size game animal isn't safe or good advice. So usually when hunters spear hunt, and they spear hunt frequently, they do it with a team approach. They have dogs or multiple people. There's usually a gun available in case things go poorly. They use proper spears with proper hunting tips. They don't tie a knife to a stick and throw it. You wouldn't want to hurl your only survival tool at an animal so it can run off with it lodged in their backside or damage it on the ground. What about skinning game? Well, what if you're talking about small game, rabbits or squirrels? This is a pretty big knife. It's 28 ounces. Are you going to get in there and do the fine work that you need to do? Wouldn't a smaller knife be more useful? I mean, I realize I'm making some people mad by what I'm about to say, but even bigger game, you know, deer have a pretty concave chest, for example. You have to sort of get up in there and free up the heart and lungs with this big wide knife, trying to do some delicate work with as little blood spillage as possible. If you're talking about cutting out the rectum to gut the deer, I mean, you could use this knife, but I'm not sure anyone would really want to. It seems like it's not well suited at all to the task. It would seem to me it'd be much more difficult than using a standard smaller knife or a gutting knife. You know, we can call this notch a gut hook if we want, but it's not a gut hook. It will not function as a gut hook. And, you know, I think that's sort of make-believe. That's sort of silliness, to be honest. So could you skin game with this? Could you process game? Yes, just like any other knife, you could process game with it. You can process game with hedge clippers if you have the dedication. So the knife claims to be a fence breaker or wire breaker. You put the wire from the fence in the first notch there, and then jerk it to one side, and it'll break it. I'm not sure why this is needed in a knife. It doesn't work on chain link fences. There has to be tension on the piece of wire? Are you breaking into prison? Are you breaking out of prison? Are you just trespassing? Are you just trespassing and damaging people's property? You can't climb over the fence. This is a function I don't understand. The quarter rounder, so you can use that notch or the quarter rounder notch to round off some wood for a bow or bow drill or something like that. And I have to admit it works. It's easier than using a standard knife. Curiously, the manual points out the knife is good for scrimshaw. I don't think that's the case, and I'm not sure why that would be an added benefit to the knife. Batoning isn't mentioned specifically in the user manual, but I think for a knife this size we should expect it to do some. It really tears up the back of your baton, the sawback does, and it has the same problems that it did with chopping. It just sort of eats away at portions of the larger branches. You can see the difference here when you use an uninterrupted blade. Remove nice big chunks as opposed to making sort of little chips. So for a larger diameter branch, you do have to engage the quarter rounder or that notch, the interrupted portion of the blade. I don't know that it affects function that much in splitting the wood. I will say that it's a wide enough blade and flat enough on the sides, and it's got that traction coating that it does tend to get stuck. In fact, this is taking way too long to get through this piece of wood. But for shorter diameter or smaller diameter branches, it does really well. Alright guys, let's circle back around. The added weight does not provide enough chopping performance to justify the pounds in my opinion. I think it's overpriced. There are some gimmicky features here. A few are just silly, a few others clearly don't work, and in the case of the quarter rounder, that interruption in the blade there, I think it degrades the tracker's slicing, chopping, batoning effectiveness significantly. For less money and for less weight, you can get quality tools that do more and do them better. I have some examples here. Watch this. Tom Brown tracker lovers, don't hate me. The knife has some good things going for it. It's got a good steel, good heat treat, nice comfortable handle, quality sheath. It's just not for me at the end of the day. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me why I'm wrong. Check in with your own version of your Neskmuk Trio, and have a good one.